My name is Annie, and at 68 years old, I never expected to be starting over. After losing my Thomas 5 years ago, my whole world became my son Jake and my three beautiful grandchildren. I thought I was doing everything right, being there whenever they needed me. Then came that Sunday brunch when my daughter-in-law Stephanie looked me straight in the eyes and said those words I never thought I would hear. If you're watching this from somewhere cozy, take a second to hit subscribe, and let me know in the comments if you've ever had to stand up for yourself against family. Trust me, what happened next changed everything. I was married to Thomas for 40 wonderful years before his heart gave out. We built a beautiful life together in our 2-story colonial in Connecticut, raised our only son Jake, and planned for a retirement filled with travel and grandchildren. Thomas was always the planner, making sure we paid off our mortgage early and saved enough to be comfortable. He would often say, "Annie, we work hard now so we can enjoy every minute later." Those words became my mantra after he was gone. Jake was always a mama's boy, though he would hate me saying that now. As a child, he would follow me around the kitchen when I baked his little hands covered in flour as he helped press cookie cutters into dough. When Thomas worked late, Jake and I created our own special traditions. Every Friday night was our movie night, complete with homemade popcorn and root beer floats. As he grew older, those moments became fewer, but our bond remained strong. When Jake brought Stephanie home 8 years ago, I was thrilled. She was beautiful, smart, and seemed to adore my son. She worked in marketing for a luxury brand and carried herself with such confidence. I remember telling my sister on the phone, he found someone special. The wedding was everything a mother could dream of for her son. I insisted on paying for everything, wanting them to start their marriage without financial stress. $50,000 later, they had the perfect day, and seeing Jake's happiness made every penny worthwhile. The grandchildren came along soon after. First Lily, now 7, with her grandfather's gentle eyes and curious nature. Then Noah, 5, a bundle of energy who never stops moving. Finally, little Emma, just 3, who has me wrapped around her tiny finger. Being a grandmother filled the hole Thomas's passing had left in my heart. I converted our home office into a playroom, bought 3 different sizes of bicycles for the driveway, and always kept their favorite snacks in my pantry. My financial support didn't stop with the wedding. When they found their dream house 3 years ago, I offered the down payment as a gift. 30% down meant they could afford a beautiful 4-bedroom in a top school district. I even suggested I could help with the monthly mortgage payments. "Think of it as an early inheritance," I told Jake. "Your father would want you to have it now when you need it most." That arrangement continued until recently, with $2,000 automatically transferring from my account to theirs each month. The children's education was important to me, too. When Stephanie mentioned the prestigious Oak Ridge Academy for Lily, I immediately offered to cover the tuition. $15,000 a year seemed a small price to pay for my granddaughter's future. Noah followed the next year, doubling the expense, but I never complained. Family was everything to Thomas and me, and continuing his legacy of generosity felt right. Holidays were always special in our family. For 40 years, Christmas happened at our house, with Thomas carving the turkey and later playing Santa for Jake. After he passed, continuing those traditions became even more important to me. The 12-foot tree in the living room, the hand-knitted stockings hung by the fireplace, the Christmas village that took 3 days to set up. Every December 24th, our home filled with the scent of pine and cinnamon and the sound of carols playing softly in the background. Even as Jake created his own family, Christmas remained at my house. I hired caterers to prepare the perfect meal, wanting Stephanie to relax and enjoy rather than work in the kitchen. $8,000 for the holiday feast seemed reasonable to create perfect memories for my grandchildren. I wanted them to associate their grandmother's house with warmth, love, and tradition. Looking back, I can see there were early signs of trouble with Stephanie that I chose to ignore. The way she would rearrange my table settings when she thought I wasn't looking. The subtle comments about my home being traditional when her style was modern. How she would check her watch repeatedly during our family dinners, always having some reason they needed to leave early. But I brushed these moments aside, telling myself that all relationships have adjustment periods. Thomas always said I was too willing to see the good in people even when evidence suggested otherwise. Despite these small tensions, I remained hopeful. Whenever Stephanie seemed distant, I would simply increase my efforts. More gifts for the children, more offers to babysit, more financial support. I believed that if I could just show them how much I cared, everything would fall into place. Family harmony was worth any price to me, and I was willing to pay it. The changes happened so gradually that I almost didn't notice them at first. 2 years ago, our Sunday dinners went from weekly to bi-weekly to whenever we can make it. Phone calls from Jake once daily became rare events that felt scripted and hurried. When I called him, it often went to voicemail with a text response hours later explaining how busy they were. Visits with my grandchildren became structured affairs. Instead of the casual drop-ins where I could scoop them up for impromptu ice cream trips or story time, everything had to be scheduled in advance. "We're trying to maintain the children's routines," Stephanie explained when I asked about the change. "Consistency is important for their development." The spontaneous joy of grandparenting was replaced with allocated time slots, usually supervised by Stephanie herself. Holiday planning also shifted. Though Christmas dinner still happened at my house, Stephanie began taking control of other aspects. 2 Thanksgivings ago, she announced they would be hosting at their home. "It's too much work for you, Annie," she insisted, despite my protest that I enjoyed every minute of preparation. That year, I sat at their dining table eating turkey that was too dry, missing the comfort of my own home and traditions. Easter, once a cheerful egg hunt in my large backyard, moved to a country club brunch of Stephanie's choosing. 4th of July, previously, a backyard barbecue with Thomas's famous ribs, became a pool party at their friend's house where I knew no one. Each change came with perfect logical explanations that made it impossible to object without seeming unreasonable. I tried repeatedly to stay involved, offering help with everything from childcare to meal preparation. "We've got it covered," became Stephanie's standard response, delivered with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. When I suggested taking the children for a weekend to give them a break, there was always some activity or play date that couldn't be missed. Last Christmas revealed the deepening problem. Though the celebration remained at my house, Stephanie informed me 2 days before that they would need to leave by 4 in the afternoon for another commitment. The carefully planned dinner had to be moved up. Gifts were opened in a rush, and the leisurely day of togetherness I had anticipated was compressed into a few hurried hours. I later discovered through social media that their commitment was a party at her friend's house, where they appeared to be having a wonderful time without me. My 70th birthday passed with barely an acknowledgement. After waiting all day for a call, I finally received a text from Jake at 8 in the evening. "Sorry, crazy day. Happy birthday, Mom." 3 days later, they arranged a hasty dinner at a restaurant where Stephanie spent most of the time on her phone, and the children were tired and cranky. The gift they presented was a generic scarf with the store receipt still in the bag, clearly purchased that same day. My friends began to notice and comment on the situation. Barbara, my closest friend since college, didn't mince words after witnessing Stephanie's behavior at a community fundraiser. "Annie, that girl is pushing you out," she said bluntly. "She's building a wall between you and Jake." I defended Stephanie, then making excuses about the stress of raising 3 children. But Barbara's words stayed with me, a splinter in my mind I couldn't remove. Jake himself changed in subtle ways. Our conversations, once open and warm, became guarded. He seemed to weigh each word carefully before speaking, as if being evaluated. The light-hearted stories about his day, or the children's antics, were replaced with superficial pleasantries. When I asked direct questions about their lives, his answers were vague and quickly redirected. It felt like talking to a polite stranger rather than my son. The internal conflict I experienced was agonizing. Every instinct told me to speak up, to confront the growing distance. But fear held me back. What if addressing the problem only made it worse? What if Stephanie convinced Jake to cut me off completely? The thought of losing access to my grandchildren terrified me more than the slow erosion of my relationship with them. So I smiled and pretended not to notice, becoming smaller and more accommodating with each interaction. 4 months ago, I experienced a health scare that brought everything into sharper focus. Severe chest pains sent me to the emergency room, where doctors discovered it was not a heart attack but severe anxiety. I spent 8 hours there alone, never calling Jake because I didn't want to bother them. The kind nurse who drove me home afterward seemed more concerned about my well-being than my own family had been in months. That night, looking around my empty house filled with family photos of people who rarely visited, I admitted to myself what had been happening. I was becoming an outsider looking in on my own family. My role had been reduced to financial provider and occasional visitor, my presence tolerated rather than welcomed. The realization brought both clarity and pain. But still, I held on to hope that things could change, that this was just a phase in our family evolution that we would overcome together. The text from Jake came on a Wednesday evening brunch this Sunday at Westfield Bistro, 11 a.m. Have something special to discuss. My heart lifted immediately. Perhaps they had recognized the distance too, and wanted to reconnect. Maybe this was the turning point I had been praying for. I spent the next 3 days anticipating our time together, shopping for small gifts for the grandchildren, and even buying a new blouse for the occasion. Westfield Bistro was an upscale restaurant known for its elegant Sunday brunches and garden seating. I arrived 15 minutes early, wanting to secure a good table for all of us. The hostess informed me that Jake had already made a reservation and led me to a round table in the corner of the patio. As I waited, I rehearsed light-hearted stories to tell the children and thought about how I would really listen to Stephanie, make her feel valued and heard. They arrived at 11:15, the children rushing toward me with excited hugs, while Jake and Stephanie followed more slowly. I noticed immediately that Stephanie was wearing a new designer dress, and Jake had on the expensive watch I had given him for his 40th birthday, something he usually saved for special occasions. The seating arrangement quickly established the tone. Stephanie positioned herself at what felt like the head of the table with Jake and the children on either side of her, leaving me at the opposite end, partially blocked by a decorative plant. The initial conversation was pleasant enough. Lily proudly showed me her Student of the Week certificate. Noah described his soccer goal in animated detail, and little Emma simply wanted to sit in my lap, playing with my necklace as she always did. I soaked in these precious moments, aware of how rare they had become. Stephanie maintained a smile while tapping occasionally on her phone, interjecting comments about the children's busy schedule and their recent achievements. After we ordered, as the children became occupied with the coloring sheets provided by the restaurant, Stephanie cleared her throat and looked at Jake meaningfully. He nodded slightly, and she turned to me with what I can only describe as a practiced expression of consideration. "Annie." She began, her voice carrying that professional tone she used for difficult conversations. "We wanted to talk to you about the holidays coming up. Jake and I have been thinking that we should try something different this year." She paused, taking a sip of her mimosa before continuing. "We're thinking of doing Christmas differently this year, just our immediate family. We'll celebrate with you another time, of course." The words hung in the air between us. Just our immediate family. The implication was unmistakable. I was not considered immediate family. The grandmother who had been present at each child's birth, who had rocked them through colicky nights when their parents needed sleep, who funded their education and helped provide their home, was now an outsider. Jake wouldn't meet my eyes, suddenly very interested in rearranging the silverware in front of him. His silence was a betrayal more painful than Stephanie's words. I looked at my son, willing him to speak up, to object, to remember all our Christmases together. But he remained quiet, complicit. "But Grandma always does," Christmas Lily protested, looking confused. "Who will set up the Christmas village? Who will make the special hot chocolate?" "We can do all those things at our house, sweetheart," Stephanie answered smoothly. "We can start our own traditions. Wouldn't that be fun?" "I want Grandma Emma," said simply, her little hand still clutching my necklace. Stephanie's smile tightened slightly. "Annie, you understand, don't you? It's just so much work for you every year. All that preparation, the big meal. You're not getting any younger, and we worry about you doing too much." The false concern stung worse than outright cruelty would have. I was perfectly capable of hosting Christmas, especially since I hired caterers to handle the food. This wasn't about my well-being. It was about my exclusion. "The kids have so many activities now," she continued, "and traveling between houses on Christmas Day is stressful for them. We thought it would be simpler to just have a quiet celebration at home than Maybe visit you for New Year's instead. I felt a physical pain in my chest, like something breaking inside me. But decades of being a proper Connecticut wife and mother had taught me how to maintain composure in public. I kept my face neutral, though I could feel heat rising in my cheeks and a slight tremor in my hands that I hid by placing them in my lap. "I see" was all I could manage at first. Then, gathering myself, "If that's what you think is best for the family." My voice sounded strange to my own ears, distant and hollow. The remainder of the brunch passed in a blur. I barely touched my food, moving it around the plate while attempting to maintain conversation with the children. Stephanie launched into detailed descriptions of their Christmas plans. The new decorations she had ordered, the matching pajamas she had found for everyone. Each word was another small cut. Jake occasionally glanced at me with what might have been guilt, but he quickly looked away each time our eyes met. When the check came, I reached for it automatically as I always did, but Jake insisted on paying this time. It struck me as odd, this sudden assertion of financial independence, on the same day they were asserting their separation from me. Perhaps paying for an $80 brunch made it easier for him to forget about the thousands I contributed to their lives each month. As we prepared to leave, I hugged each grandchild, tightly breathing in their scents, memorizing the feel of their small arms around my neck. "Will you still make Christmas cookies with me?" Grandma Noah whispered in my ear. "Of course, sweetheart," I promised, though I had no idea if Stephanie would actually allow it. The goodbye with Jake was awkward, a brief hug that felt mechanical. Stephanie offered her cheek for the customary kiss, her body stiff and unyielding. "We'll call you about New Year's," she said, already turning away. I walked to my car, with careful, measured steps, determined not to let them see how devastated I felt. Only when I was safely inside with the doors locked did I allow the tears to come, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I sat there crying for 20 minutes before I felt composed enough to drive home, the taste of rejection bitter in my mouth. The drive home from the restaurant was 17 miles of pure agony. Every Christmas song on the radio felt like salt in an open wound. I switched stations only to hear a commercial about family gatherings, then turned it off, completely preferring the silence. The route took me past the children's favorite park, the ice cream shop where we celebrated lost teeth, the bookstore where I bought them each, a new book every month. Each familiar landmark now seemed to mock me with memories of happier times. When Thomas was alive, he would know exactly what to say at a moment like this. I could almost hear him. "Don't let them see you sweat, Annie girl." His voice was so clear in my mind that I caught myself answering him aloud, an old woman talking to ghosts in an empty car. Our house, the one Thomas and I had purchased 42 years ago when Jake was just a baby, stood welcoming, as always, with its crisp, white paint and navy shutters. Thomas had insisted on planting 2 oak trees in the front yard, saying, "By the time these are full-grown, Annie, we'll be watching our grandchildren climb them." Only one of those predictions had come true. The trees were magnificent now, but Thomas never got to see any of our grandchildren scramble up their sturdy branches. Walking into the empty house hit me harder than usual. The silence was oppressive. 15 rooms that once bustled with life and laughter now echoed with absence. I moved through the entryway, past the wall of family photos, each smiling face now seeming like a stranger. The kitchen where I had taught Jake to bake his father's favorite cookies. The living room where the Christmas tree would stand in a few weeks, though apparently with no one to gather around it this year. I sank into Thomas's old leather armchair, still positioned facing the bay window as he liked it, and finally allowed myself to fully break down. The sobs came from deep within, raw and primal, the accumulated grief of years of gradual rejection releasing all at once. I cried for the family I was losing, for Thomas, who wasn't here to help me through it, for the grandchildren who would grow up with memories of Christmas that didn't include their grandmother's house. After what felt like hours, I pulled myself together enough to check my phone. No messages, no calls, no acknowledgement of what had just happened or concern for how I might be feeling. It was as if the brunch conversation had been perfectly normal, rather than a bombshell that shattered my world. I scrolled mindlessly through social media, a habit I'd developed to feel connected to my family when they didn't include me directly. A fresh post from Stephanie appeared at the top of my feed, a picture of Jake and the children at what looked like a shopping mall captioned, "Picking out special decorations for our first Christmas in our own home. So excited for new traditions with the people who matter most." Posted just 30 minutes after our brunch. The implied message couldn't have been clearer. As I continued scrolling, another post caught my eye from 2 days earlier. Stephanie had shared photos of a lunch with her parents captioned, "Planning Christmas with Mom and Dad. Can't wait to have them stay with us for the whole week." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't being excluded because they wanted an intimate, immediate family Christmas. I was being excluded because I wasn't the right grandparent. Stephanie's parents were taking my place. The phone rang, startling me from this painful discovery. It was Barbara checking in, as she often did on Sundays. "How was the special brunch?" she asked, her voice warm with genuine interest. I tried to answer casually but broke down again instead, the words pouring out between sobs as I explained what had happened. "Those ungrateful little..." Barbara didn't finish the sentence, but her indignation on my behalf was exactly what I needed. "After everything you've done for them, the mortgage payments, the tuition, the countless gifts and support." Her words triggered a sudden realization. I was still paying their mortgage. $2,000 left my account automatically on the first of every month, a gift I had been giving since they purchased the house. The house where they would be celebrating Christmas without me, while hosting Stephanie's parents for a week. I was also paying for the Christmas catering as I did every year. $8,000 for a gourmet holiday meal, wine pairing, and service staff, all arranged through my account with Elegant Affairs Catering. Stephanie simply selected the menu each year, often upgrading options, knowing I would cover the cost without question. "Barbara," I said slowly, my mind suddenly very clear, "I think I've been a fool." "No, Annie, you've been a mother." "There's a difference," she replied gently. But there was a difference between being generous and being taken advantage of. Between supporting my family and subsidizing my own exclusion. The clarity of this thought was both painful and liberating. I had been allowing myself to be used as a financial resource while being pushed aside emotionally. For the next few hours, Barbara and I talked through everything. The pattern of behavior over years. The increasing boldness of the exclusion. The way Jake had changed from my loving son to Stephanie's silent partner. As the sun set outside my window, I came to a decision that felt both terrifying and necessary. "I won't fight for a seat at their table," I told Barbara finally, my voice steadier than it had been all day. "But I won't subsidize my own exclusion either." That night I barely slept, my mind working through practical considerations. I wasn't vengeful by nature. I didn't want to punish Jake and Stephanie, or hurt my grandchildren, but I needed to reclaim my dignity and establish that I deserved basic respect. Financial support should be given freely out of love, not extracted through obligation while the giver is pushed aside. In the morning, I made 3 phone calls. First, to my financial advisor who had helped Thomas and me plan our retirement and who managed my accounts since his passing. Then to my lawyer who had drafted our wills and handled various legal matters over the years. Finally, to a therapist Barbara had recommended months ago, whom I had been too proud to call until now. Each conversation strengthened my resolve. This wasn't about retribution, but reclamation. Not about hurting my family, but healing myself. For the first time since Thomas died, I felt like I was acting from a place of self-respect rather than desperate need for connection. It wasn't a good feeling exactly, but it was a necessary one. The next morning, I woke with purpose. The grief and shock had settled into a calm determination that reminded me of how I felt after Thomas's diagnosis, when we had 6 months to prepare for the inevitable. That same clarity guided me now as I dressed carefully in the pearl gray suit I reserved for important occasions, applied light makeup, and styled my silver hair. The woman in the mirror looked older than I remembered, but also stronger. My first stop was the bank where I had been a customer for 43 years. The personal banking manager, Michael, had known Thomas and me since he was a young teller. He expressed appropriate concern when I explained I needed to make changes to my automatic payments. "I'll be discontinuing the monthly transfer to my son's mortgage account," I explained, keeping my voice steady, and I'll need to close the joint emergency account I share with him. Michael didn't ask for explanations, just nodded professionally and processed the changes. The joint account contained nearly $30,000 money I had set aside for Jake in case of unexpected expenses. I transferred it to my personal savings, knowing it was the right thing to do, but still feeling a twinge of maternal guilt. Back in my car, I made the call I had been both dreading and anticipating. Elegant Affairs Catering had been handling our holiday meals since Thomas became too ill to enjoy my cooking. Caroline, the owner, answered with her usual cheerful efficiency. "Annie, I was just about to call you. Stephanie sent over some menu upgrades for Christmas. She's added the premium wine pairing and seafood appetizer station. It's going to be absolutely spectacular." I took a deep breath. "Actually, Caroline, that's why I'm calling. I need to cancel the Christmas order entirely." There was a pause. "Cancel?" But Stephanie just confirmed yesterday. She's added nearly $2,000 in upgrades. Of course she had. I understand, and I apologize for any inconvenience. If there's a cancellation fee, I'll cover it, but the event won't be happening at my home this year. After finishing that difficult conversation, I drove to my lawyer's office. Harold Abernathy had been Thomas's college roommate and had handled our legal affairs for decades. His downtown office still maintained the old-world charm of polished wood and leather-bound books that seemed increasingly rare in our digital age. "Annie," he greeted me warmly, rising from behind his imposing desk. "This is an unexpected pleasure. What brings you in today?" Over the next 2 hours, Harold helped me restructure my will and establish 3 separate educational trusts for my grandchildren. The previous version had left everything directly to Jake, with the assumption he would manage it for his children. The new arrangement ensured the money would be used specifically for their education and could not be accessed for other purposes. I also added a stipulation that the children must spend 2 weeks each summer with me until they turned 18 for the trusts to remain active. "Are you sure about these changes?" Harold asked, his kind eyes studying my face. "They represent a significant shift in your estate planning." "I'm sure," I replied, signing the documents with a steady hand. "I love my grandchildren and want to provide for their future. But I also want to ensure I remain part of their lives." My next appointment was with Dr. Susan Chen, the therapist Barbara had recommended. Her office was warm and inviting with comfortable chairs and soft lighting that immediately put me at ease. I hadn't planned to cry, but within 10 minutes of explaining my situation, the tears came again. Dr. Chen listened attentively, offering tissues without interrupting my story. "What you're doing takes immense courage," she said when I finished. "Setting boundaries with family is often the hardest type of self-care." "I feel selfish," I admitted. "A good mother would just accept whatever relationship her son offers." "A healthy relationship goes both ways," she countered gently. "You deserve respect, Annie. And sometimes the kindest thing we can do for others is show them how to treat us properly." We scheduled weekly sessions, another step in my new journey of self-respect. As I left her office, I felt lighter somehow, as if putting words to my pain had diminished its power over me. That evening, I called Barbara and 3 other friends I had neglected while focusing exclusively on Jake's family. We made plans for Christmas week, including volunteer work at the local shelter and perhaps a short trip to a nearby bed and breakfast. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a holiday that didn't revolve around Jake and Stephanie, and while it brought sadness, it also offered a strange new freedom. The final task was the hardest emotionally. I went into the attic and found the boxes labeled Christmas Village. For 25 years, I had set up this miniature Victorian town on my dining room sideboard, adding a new building each year. The children loved it, especially the tiny ice skaters that moved in circles around the pond when wound with a special key. I carefully packed half the village pieces into a separate box and drove them to the women's shelter downtown. The director was delighted with the donation. "The children here will love creating their own little world with these," she assured me. Giving away even part of the collection was painful but also liberating. I was choosing to share joy rather than hoard memories. As I drove home in the gathering dusk, I realized I hadn't felt vengeful or bitter while taking these actions. Instead, I felt like I was reclaiming parts of myself that had been slowly eroding under the constant strain of one-sided giving. I wasn't cutting off my family, but creating space for a relationship based on mutual respect rather than financial dependence. That night, I wrote in my journal for the first time since Thomas died. Today, I remembered that I matter too, I concluded. Whatever happens next, I will face it with dignity and an open heart. But I will never again allow myself to be treated as an ATM rather than a grandmother and mother. Thomas would be proud. For 2 weeks, silence stretched between us. I resisted the almost overwhelming urge to call Jake to explain my actions, to apologize despite having done nothing wrong. Old habits die hard, and my habit had always been to smooth things over, to make peace at any personal cost. But Dr. Chen had encouraged me to sit with the discomfort and allow Jake and Stephanie to come to their own realizations. The first crack in the wall came exactly 16 days after the brunch. My phone rang at 9:30 in the morning, Stephanie's name flashing on the screen. I took a deep breath before answering, keeping my voice neutral and pleasant. "Annie," she began without preamble, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "There must be some mistake with the caterer. Caroline says you canceled the Christmas order. I just got off the phone with her and she insists she can't reinstate it because they're fully booked now." "That's correct," I replied calmly. "Since Christmas will be at your house this year, I assumed you'd make your own arrangements." A beat of silence, but we always use elegant affairs. The children expect those special desserts they make. "I'm sure you'll find an alternative," I said. "There are many excellent caterers in the area." "This is ridiculous," Stephanie snapped, her composure slipping. "You know we were counting on that. It's tradition." The irony of her suddenly valuing tradition wasn't lost on me. Traditions change. I echoed her own words from the brunch. "You mentioned wanting to start new ones." Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted to the persuasive tone she typically used when trying to get her way. "Annie, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Of course we want you involved in Christmas. We just thought you'd enjoy not having the stress of hosting." "How thoughtful," I replied, keeping my voice light. "But I've already made other plans for Christmas Day. I'll be volunteering at the shelter and then traveling with friends." "But the children will be so disappointed," she protested. "They're expecting their Christmas village and stockings at your house." "I'm sure they'll adapt," I said. "Children are resilient, and I've donated half the village to the shelter so those children can enjoy it too." That information clearly stunned her into silence. When she recovered, her tone was noticeably colder. "I see. Well, we'll figure something out." She hung up without saying goodbye. 3 days later came the second contact. This time it was a call from Jake, his voice tight with panic. "Mom, did you stop paying our mortgage?" I had been preparing for this conversation, but still felt my heart race. "Yes," I answered simply. "Why would you do that?" he demanded. "We had an arrangement." "The arrangement was a gift, Jake, not an obligation. Gifts can change." "The bank called us about a missed payment," he continued, his voice rising. "Do you know how embarrassing that was? How could you do this to us without even warning us?" His choice of words stung. Not "how could you stop helping us," but "how could you do this to us?" As if my financial support was an entitlement rather than a generous act of love. I thought it best to reconsider our financial entanglements, given the changes in our family dynamic. I explained, struggling to maintain my composure. "You're establishing independence in other ways." This seemed a natural extension. "What are you talking about?" His frustration was palpable even through the phone. "Is this because of Christmas?" Stephanie said you seemed upset at brunch. "Jake," I said carefully, "when your wife informed me that I wasn't welcome for Christmas with my only family, she made it clear that I'm not considered immediate family anymore. I'm respecting that boundary by adjusting my financial support accordingly." "That's not fair," he protested. "Stephanie never said you weren't welcome. She just thought it would be easier for everyone if we did it differently this year." "Easier for whom, Jake?" I asked quietly. "Not for me. And not for the children who specifically said they wanted me there." There was a long silence on the line. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, less angry and more uncertain. "I never meant to hurt you, Mom." "I know," I said, and I did know. My son wasn't cruel by nature, just conflict avoidant and increasingly under his wife's influence. But intentions don't change the impact. "We need to talk about this," he said finally. "About everything. Can I come over tomorrow, just me?" I agreed, my heart both hopeful and apprehensive about what this conversation might bring. Jake arrived the next afternoon looking tired and tense, more disheveled than I had seen him in years. He stood awkwardly in the entryway of the home he had grown up in, as if unsure of his welcome. I led him to the kitchen where I had prepared coffee and his favorite oatmeal cookies, just as I used to when he came home from school with problems to discuss. For several minutes, we engaged in stilted small talk about the children and his work. Then, staring into his coffee cup, he finally broached the real subject. "Mom, I feel caught in the middle here." "I understand that's difficult," I acknowledged. "But Jake, I'm your mother. I've supported you in every way I could your entire life. When did I become someone you could exclude from family holidays without a second thought?" His shoulders slumped. "It's complicated. Stephanie has strong ideas about family and traditions. She wants the children to have Christmas memories centered around their own home. And her parents," I added quietly. He looked up, startled. "How did you know about that?" "Social media," I explained. "Stephanie posted about their week-long visit for Christmas. The same day she told me I wasn't welcome." Jake winced visibly. "I didn't know she'd done that." "I'm sorry." "Why didn't you say anything at brunch?" I asked the question that had been haunting me for weeks. "You just sat there while she told me I wasn't wanted at Christmas." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so, like his father, it made my heart ache. I should have spoken up. But Stephanie and I had discussed it beforehand, and I had reluctantly agreed. She can be very persuasive. "That's not an excuse, Jake. You're a grown man, not a child." He nodded, accepting the criticism. "You're right. The truth is, it's been building for a while. Stephanie has always been a bit jealous of our relationship, of the children's attachment to you. She feels like she's competing with you for their affection." This admission, though painful to hear, made pieces fall into place. "That doesn't justify how you've both been treating me." "No, it doesn't," he agreed, meeting my eyes directly for the first time. "And the financial stuff. Mom, I had no idea how much we'd come to depend on your help until it suddenly stopped. It's embarrassing to admit, but we're going to struggle to make the mortgage payment this month." "You make a good salary, Jake. And Stephanie recently got that promotion she wanted." "We've been living beyond our means," he confessed. "The private school tuition for 2 kids, the country club membership. Stephanie insists on the renovations to the house. Without your help, it's going to be tough." Part of me wanted to immediately offer assistance to fall back into the familiar pattern of rescuing my son. But I held firm. "I'm sorry that's difficult, but these are consequences of adult choices. You and Stephanie need to figure out your finances together." We talked for nearly 3 hours, delving into years of accumulated tensions and misunderstandings. Jake revealed that Stephanie had long felt intimidated by me, by the close bond I shared with the children, by the financial security I represented. Her way of managing that insecurity had been to gradually assert control by limiting my access and influence. "I should have seen what was happening," he admitted. "But it was easier to go along with it than to confront the issue." As our conversation wound down, Jake looked exhausted, but somehow lighter. "I'll talk to Stephanie," he promised. "Really talk to her about all of this. We need to find a better way forward." "I'd like that," I said sincerely. "I miss my son, and I miss my grandchildren terribly." Before he left, Jake hugged me tightly, the way he used to before Stephanie came into our lives. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'll fix this somehow." "We'll fix it together," I corrected gently. "That's how families work." I watched him drive away with mixed emotions. Hope that this honest conversation might lead to healing, but caution born from experience. Actions would matter more than words going forward. Over the next week, Jake called daily with updates. Stephanie had been initially furious about my financial manipulation, as she called it. But as the reality of their situation sank, in her anger gave way to grudging recognition that they needed to reassess their relationship with me. "The conversation wasn't easy," Jake reported, "but it was necessary." 10 days after our talk, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. I opened it to find Jake standing there with all 3 children, their faces glowing with excitement at the surprise visit. "We thought Grandma might like some company," Jake explained, smiling tentatively. "And someone has an apology letter to deliver." Lily solemnly handed me an envelope containing a handwritten note from Stephanie. The words were clearly chosen, carefully acknowledging the hurt she had caused, and expressing a desire to start fresh with clearer communication and mutual respect. It wasn't a complete capitulation, but it was a beginning. The children swarmed into the house, exclaiming over the partially assembled Christmas village and immediately asking if we could bake cookies. For the next few hours, my kitchen filled with laughter and flour dust, and the sweet chaos I had missed so desperately. Jake joined in, reminiscing about cooking with me when he was their age, creating a bridge between past and present. As they prepared to leave, Jake mentioned casually, "We were thinking maybe we could do Christmas Eve here like always. The traditional dinner and presents. Then Christmas Day at our house with Stephanie's parents. Would that work for you?" The compromise wasn't perfect, but it was a genuine attempt at reconciliation. "I think that would be lovely." I agreed, my heart lighter than it had been in weeks. Christmas Eve arrived crisp and clear, the kind of winter day that sparkles with possibility. I had scaled back the decorations this year, focusing on quality over quantity. The tree was smaller but elegantly trimmed with the antique ornaments Thomas and I had collected over 40 years of marriage. The remaining pieces of the Christmas village glowed warmly on the sideboard, reduced in size, but not in charm. Without the usual catering service, I had prepared a simpler meal with Barbara's help. Homemade lasagna, Thomas's favorite garlic bread, and a fresh salad. For dessert, the children and I had baked cookies the previous weekend, an afternoon of controlled chaos that had been more satisfying than any professionally catered meal. When the doorbell rang at 4 o'clock, I smoothed my holiday dress and took a deep breath before answering. The family stood on my porch, the children vibrating with excitement, Jake and Stephanie holding gifts and looking slightly nervous. Stephanie met my eyes directly, her usual confidence tempered with something new, perhaps humility. "Merry Christmas, Annie," she said, offering a genuine smile. "Thank you for having us." The evening unfolded with a warmth I hadn't dared to hope for. The children devoured the lasagna, declaring it even better than restaurant food. Stephanie complimented the decorations and made a visible effort to engage me in conversation about my volunteer work and plans with friends. Jake seemed more relaxed than I had seen him in years, the tension that usually hovered around his shoulders noticeably absent. After dinner came the exchange of gifts. The children had made handcrafted presents, a painted flower pot from Lily, a beaded bracelet from Noah, and a slightly lopsided clay heart from Emma. "So you can keep us close to your heart, Grandma," she explained solemnly, making my eyes fill with tears. Jake and Stephanie's gift was unexpected, a framed family portrait taken recently, all 5 of them smiling against an autumn background. "We thought you might like an updated photo," Jake explained. "And we'd like to schedule regular family pictures going forward, so you always have current ones." My gift to them was equally meaningful, 3 children's books I had custom-made featuring Lily, Noah, and Emma as the main characters. "Even when we're not together," I told them, "you can read these and remember how much Grandma loves you." As the evening wound down and the children grew tired, Stephanie approached me while Jake was helping Noah with a new toy. "I want to apologize properly," she said quietly. "The letter was a start, but I need to say it to your face. I was wrong in how I treated you. Jealousy and insecurity aren't excuses for unkindness." Her candor surprised me. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "It means a lot to hear." "Jake and I have been talking," she continued. "A lot. About finances, about family boundaries, about everything, really. We're making some changes." She hesitated. "We're pulling Noah out of private school next semester. It's just too expensive without your help, and we need to live within our means." "That must be a difficult decision," I said, careful not to offer financial assistance that might undermine the progress we were making. "It is, but it's the right one," she acknowledged. "We became too dependent on your generosity. That wasn't fair to you or healthy for us." After they left promises of seeing me the next afternoon at their house hanging in the air, I sat in the quiet of my living room feeling a complex mixture of emotions. There was lingering hurt, yes, but also cautious hope and a new sense of self-respect that had been missing for too long. Christmas Day found me serving breakfast at the homeless shelter with Barbara and two other friends. The simple act of providing warm food and conversation to those less fortunate put my own family drama into perspective. One elderly man, after receiving his plate of pancakes, told me, "You remind me of my daughter. She has your kind eyes." The comment warmed me in a way no expensive gift could have. In the afternoon, I arrived at Jake and Stephanie's house, bearing just a few small additional gifts. Stephanie's parents were already there, and I braced myself for awkwardness. Instead, her father immediately engaged me in conversation about gardening, while her mother helped me hang my coat with genuine warmth. They weren't the villains I had imagined in my hurt, just grandparents who loved their grandchildren as I did. The day passed pleasantly with none of the tension I had feared. Before dinner, Jake took me aside to share some news. "Stephanie and I have our first appointment with a family therapist next week," he told me. "We both think it will help us communicate better with each other and with you." "I think that's wonderful," I said sincerely. "I've been seeing someone myself. It's been incredibly helpful." He nodded, looking both surprised and pleased by this information. "We're going to figure this out, Mom. All of us together." In January, we had our first official family meeting with Dr. Walsh, the therapist Jake and Stephanie had chosen. Sitting in the comfortable office, the three of us discussed expectations, boundaries, and communication styles. Stephanie spoke with surprising openness about her insecurities, as a mother and wife feeling constantly measured against my established relationship with Jake and the children. "I felt like I was competing with a perfect grandmother," she admitted. "Someone who could afford anything the children wanted, who had history and traditions I couldn't match." "And I felt increasingly pushed out of my own family," I responded. "Like my only value was financial." Dr. Walsh helped us establish clear guidelines for moving forward. Regular family dinners without phones or distractions. Advance planning for holidays with input from everyone. Financial independence for Jake and Stephanie, with the understanding that I would still contribute to an education fund for the grandchildren, but not to their household expenses. Healthy boundaries. Dr. Walsh explained, "Create healthy relationships. The goal isn't to never need each other, but to need each other in ways that respect everyone's dignity." Over the following months, our family dynamic shifted gradually into something new and stronger. Jake took over their mortgage payments, working extra consulting hours to make it possible. Stephanie found creative ways to reduce expenses without sacrificing quality of life for the children. I focused on building individual relationships with each grandchild based on shared interests rather than financial gifts. By summer, the change was remarkable. Our Sunday dinners rotated between my house and theirs, each hosting with equal enthusiasm. The children seemed more relaxed without the underlying tension that had previously colored our interactions. Jake called regularly just to chat like he used to before things became complicated. One evening in June, as we sat on my patio watching the children play in the backyard, Stephanie surprised me by saying, "I think this is better than before. All of it." "Better?" I asked, curious about her perspective. "Before, everything felt transactional somehow. Now it feels real." She looked at the children, then back at me. I didn't realize how much pressure I was putting on myself to be perfect, to control everything. It was exhausting. "For all of us," I agreed gently. Standing up for myself had been one of the hardest things I'd ever done. Harder than nursing Thomas through his final illness, harder than learning to live alone after 40 years of marriage. But like those challenges, it had revealed strengths I didn't know I possessed, and led to growth I couldn't have imagined. As I look back now, I realize that what seemed like an ending that day at brunch was actually a beginning. A beginning of honest communication, of mutual respect of relationships, based on love rather than obligation or financial dependence. Thomas would have been proud of all of us for finding our way through to this new understanding. The most important lesson I learned through this painful journey is that love doesn't mean being a doormat. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for others is to show them how to treat you properly. By reclaiming my own dignity, I actually helped my family find a healthier way to connect. To anyone watching who might be struggling with similar family dynamics, I encourage you to trust your worth. You deserve respect regardless of what you provide financially or practically. True family connections can withstand honest conversations and boundary setting. In fact, they often grow stronger because of them. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself with family members? What happened when you did? Please share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if this story resonated with you. Remember, it's never too late to change family patterns that aren't working. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the courage to write your own happy ending, whatever that may look like for you.